We are only a few days out from the Academy Awards, so I think it's time for me to rank all 10 Best Picture nominees. So let's get into it. Looking at the lineup, I think it's actually a really solid lineup. Most of these movies I actually quite enjoy, and even the ones on the bottom of this list, while I do have a lot of flaws that I can point out for them, I still got something out of them. So with that said, let's get into number 10. Starting off with a little bit of a hot take, Anatomy of a Fall. This I saw at the Brisbane International Film Festival, and I had a lot of expectations. A lot of people were talking this up. It had already won the Palme d'Or. It was going to be this potential Oscar contender. There was a lot of buzz surrounding this movie, and it just did not do it for me, I'm afraid. I did enjoy a lot of aspects to this. Sandra Hüller gives a wonderful performance, and at times the screenplay I found was quite strong. However, what let this down for me was the direction from Justine Triet. I just found some moments to really undercut a lot of the dramatic tension that it builds at times. I've referenced this many times, especially in my review for the film, but arguably the most dramatic and serious scene of this movie, and probably the best scene of this movie, this argument that plays out, and it's very intense, and there's no real need for humor here. And then a second later, it just hits you with some unintentional humor with the camera work, and moments like that just took me out of the film. I don't think the question that it asks of whether she did or didn't do it is as ambiguous as some people like to think it is. And some of the relationships could have been fleshed out a little more, which is a very big shame considering this film is really long. The fact that we don't get some of these loose threads tied up just kind of took away from the experience to me. I do like a lot of aspects to this film. I understand why a lot of people liked it, but to me it was just too flat and too dry. 9. Maestro. So Bradley Cooper just trying his best to win an Oscar here, and I felt that watching this movie, and because of that, I couldn't enjoy the movie as much as I wanted to. When I'm seeing Bradley Cooper's performance as Leonard Bernstein, I'm not seeing Leonard Bernstein. I'm seeing Bradley Cooper wearing a lot of makeup, trying his best to win an Oscar. And that to me is where you've just gone too far. Even though he's committed and he's giving it his all, and there are moments of pure technical craftsmanship that were amazing to me. The cathedral scene was phenomenal. I had chills watching it. But the screenplay and the heart of this story is just not there. Sure, it has remnants of things that could draw out emotions out of people, but they're not given the right build-up and the right payoff to really work. And because of that, this feels like a very hollow movie. Even though I did appreciate a lot of what it's trying to achieve, it's not really one that I would like to revisit in the future. Number 8 is American Fiction. This movie is the most recent that I've seen out of the Best Picture nominees, and I quite liked it. I do think it's quite a breezy movie. I think the performances are fantastic. Jeffrey Wright and Sterling K. Brown, absolutely amazing in this film, and were definitely the highlights to me. I just found though that it doesn't dive as deep into its ultimate thesis that I would have liked it to. I think it gets a little bit distracted at times, and it just doesn't quite have the payoff that I was looking for. It acknowledges its bad ending, but just because you acknowledge that you have a bad ending doesn't loop it around and make it a good one. So there are plenty of flaws here. I don't really think that this deserved a Best Picture nomination, but I do think it is a good movie. Number 7 is Barbie. Out of Greta Gerwig's films, I've placed this around the middle. I think it is her most ambitious feat, and it is so colourful, and there are moments in this that would make this a top 10 film of the year for me. I really enjoyed a lot of the performances. I think Margot Robbie is fantastic in this role. I think Ryan Gosling is incredible as Ken, delivering one of the funniest performances of the year. And at times, this is the funniest movie of the year. A lot of the jokes land. I did appreciate a lot of the writing from Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, and the direction that Gerwig provides just shows how much of a distinct vision she has in filmmaking, and I cannot wait to see what she does in the future. However, in terms of just some flaws, I do think its messaging just doesn't quite get across as effectively as it wants. It likes to beat you over the head with its messaging, and it's just painfully unsubtle, it's unnuanced, and because of that, it doesn't really become effective. It just becomes something that feels like it's lecturing you at points, and that just doesn't quite work for me, that form of storytelling. And you get a lot of that in the third act of this film. So the third act wasn't my thing, but the first two acts I was having a blast with this movie. A really fun cinematic experience that created a whole movement, and that excitement around the film was just amazing. Number 6, I have The Holdovers. This is a very charming movie, a very wholesome and heartwarming movie, even though Alexander Payne just is adamant that this isn't that, but it is. It's a great Christmas movie. The performance is once again fantastic. Paul Giamatti, deserving of his Oscar nomination, is fantastic in this movie. Dominic Sessa gives great supporting work, and Divine Joy Randolph delivers just such a great performance that will tear at your heartstrings. This film can make you feel so elated and happy at the hijinks that these characters get up to 1 minute, and then by the end of the film, it's tugging at your heartstrings and delivering these big emotional scenes that I think mostly work. To me, why this is around the middle of this list is I think that the 5 ahead of it just were a little bit more ambitious in their scope. The Holdovers to me is really good at what it's going for, but it's not going for anything grand. And for some, that's exactly what they want. For me, I just wanted a little bit more out of this film, but overall, I thought this was a great movie. Number 5, I have Jonathan Glazer's The Zone of Interest. This movie is not one that I would like to watch again, but I found it very impactful, and I do think it is a great movie that excellently handles its vision. Jonathan Glazer does something very unique with this kind of subject matter. He doesn't show you the atrocities that are committed in these concentration camps. He is making you hear it. And at points, that can actually be a lot more effective than seeing it, because your imagination is kind of at play here, and it's horrific. And the fact that some of these characters are either ignoring it or they're just going about their day-to-day life, they're talking about these aspects of the concentration camp like it's any other job, was something that will make you angry and will draw emotions out of you, as some of these atrocities are being committed right next door to their house. The characters were fascinating, but they were so despicable. Sandra Hüller, I think, gives a better performance here than her one in Anatomy of a Fall. She is an abhorrent character who abuses her power and doesn't seem to mind in the slightest what's happening next door. And even characters in this that thought they would be okay with this, get a whiff of what's happening next door. They smell the smoke, they see some of the atrocities that are happening across the wall, and then leave the next day. It just really highlights to me how evil the central characters have become. And I thought Jonathan Glazer did an excellent job of telling this story in such a unique way. Number 4, I have Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. Is this movie way too long? Absolutely. I'm definitely on that train for sure. I've seen it twice, and both times it felt like a very exhausting watch. But that doesn't mean that what is in this film is bad. This is a very quality film. I mean, it's from Martin Scorsese. The performances were just powerhouse across the board. Leonardo DiCaprio is fantastic in his lead role. I think he was deserving of an Academy Award nomination, and I find it baffling that he was snubbed this year. Lily Gladstone as well gives great supporting work here. I don't think it's a lead performance. I think it's a great supporting performance, and she nails it in this role. Robert De Niro as this antagonist is fantastic. And the fact that Scorsese doesn't shy away from the violence that is being displayed to the First Nations people in America is a brilliant way of getting this message across to the audience and showing you the violence rather than just telling it to you and lecturing it at you, kind of like what Barbie does. This shows you the atrocities that are being committed, and because of that, it's far more effective, I think. Technical craftsmanship is out of this world. The production design, the cinematography, the score, the sound, all phenomenal. There's a sequence where a bomb goes off that was horrific, and it wouldn't be as communicated as well if it weren't for the sound and the production value here. There's just so many great moments in this film that are so impactful, And you just feel like you're in the hands of a seasoned filmmaker who is really reflective of his career and what he's done and what he can do different. Some people are saying that he's in his Akira Kurosawa phase, and after seeing a little bit of Kurosawa's work, I can kind of get on board with that notion. While most of the films on this list I think are good to great, these three I think were phenomenal movies. All movies that I would give a 5 out of 5 to. Number 3 is Past Lives. One of the most emotional, almost devastating movies of the year, but I wouldn't quite call it that because there is some semblance of a happy ending and moving on in this movie. But there's a wave of emotion that hits our central character. And when that hits her, it really hits the audience hard. And it is kind of restrained for a lot of it. And you don't realize how much this relationship is affecting you until you get to that point. And I thought that was just brilliant writing from Celine Song. The fact that this is her directorial debut is insane to me. This feels like this was in the hands of a filmmaker that has been around for a while, because this film is so expertly crafted. It's such a mature look at a relationship that I think a lot of people would react the same way that these characters are acting. And I really, really like that aspect of it. It's not over dramatic, it's very mature. And because of that, I think that is the aspect that makes it so easy to connect to these characters. The performance from Greta Lee in this central role was amazing. I was a little bit annoyed that she got snubbed for Best Actress at the Oscars because I think she was totally deserving of it. Wonderful lead performance. The two performances from T.O.U. and John Magaro were also fantastic in providing different elements to this relationship and really working with the amazing screenplay that Celine Song wrote. I absolutely love this movie, and if you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. Number 2, I have Poor Things, a very controversial film from Yorgos Lanthimos, another film that I saw at the Brisbane International Film Festival. I love this movie. I think that it is a true tour de force in direction and writing and performances and production design. Across the board, it is incredibly well crafted. There are aspects of it that are definitely wacky, and if you're not on board with what this film is trying to do, and you kind of misinterpret one small aspect of this movie, it's going to fall apart. So that might be seen as a slight on the direction here, but if you're riding on that train with Yorgos Lanthimos and fully understanding, I think, what he's trying to accomplish out of this movie, I think you're in for a treat. It's not a movie I would recommend to everyone either. It is too weird. It goes into some very controversial territory, and I think if you're not on board for that type of movie, you're not going to enjoy this. However, I kind of understand what Yorgos Lanthimos does as a director, as well as a lot of people that have explored a lot of his work. And knowing that, I think he makes his best film to date. I think it was his most engaging film. I think the themes that he's trying to explore are very complex, and you wouldn't quite be as effective as communicating this without the central performance from Emma Stone, who I believe gives a Oscar-winning performance here. I think she is the most deserving of the Oscar this year because the way that this character transforms was fascinating. I really love Bella Baxter as a character, and I don't think that would have been possible without Emma Stone. A lesser director wouldn't have bungled this subject matter, and it wouldn't have been effective. And I think everyone would be hating this movie if you didn't have a director like Yorgos Lanthimos and a performance like Emma Stone's really carrying us through this film and carrying us through this entirely new vision was just so excellent. I think the film is remarkably funny. I think the supporting performances in this are fantastic. One of the best ensembles of the year. Really love this movie. And no surprises, number 1, my favorite film of 2023. And I think the film that will win Best Picture, Oppenheimer. I think it's time Christopher Nolan finally gets his due. He's done so much tremendous work over the years that I'm really surprised that he hasn't won an Oscar yet. And finally, I think it will be time with Oppenheimer. This is just an astounding piece of work that I think trumps every single other movie on this list. I don't even know how a movie like this gets made. The direction on display here, the way this is stitched together through its remarkable editing, the score that plays through most of it, but is so engaging and draws you into the movie. The whole ensemble just providing their A game here. Cillian Murphy just carrying us through this film was remarkable. The screenplay is remarkably efficient to the point where you're just totally engaged for this. This is a 3-hour movie with people mainly talking in rooms, but Nolan makes it feel so epic and grand because he utilizes a lot of what he's done in the past to make it feel that way. He utilizes sound, he changes things. He has this constant stream of editing come in that never once makes this movie feel flat. It is always exciting. There are emotionally heavy things that happen in this movie. And I think, once again, with a lesser director, you wouldn't have been able to communicate it as effectively as what Nolan does here. Oppenheimer, I think, is a masterpiece. It is one of the best films of the decade so far. And I think it will get paid its dues at the Academy Awards, and rightly so. This is a masterwork and just a true titan in filmmaking. And that's my list for the Best Picture nominees this year. I'd love to see your list in the comments below. I'm sure they're going to be wildly different to mine. I know I have some very hot takes in there, but this is just the way that I felt watching a lot of these movies. Love to hear your thoughts. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.